Welcome to the show. How are you today?
I'm good, Elliot. How are you?
I am very, very well. Thank you so much for asking. I'm excited to have you here, excited to dive into our topic of conversation today. But before we do, can you give my listeners a little insight into who you are and what it is that you do?
Yeah, absolutely. First, thanks again for having me on your show. You have a really powerful show. So I'm looking forward to not only having a powerful conversation, but also hopefully, dropping some gems that can be helpful for your audience. So I'm Jeremy, and I help men get their swagger back, as I like to call it, after a breakup or divorce, which is simply a way to say that I help men not only get back into the dating game, but more importantly, do the things that they need to do to build themselves up so that they can have the capacity to not only attract, but also to maintain the kind of relationship that they want, attract the woman that they want, and maintain the kind of relationship that they want. So, as it turns out, being a man in this day and age, that requires a lot of work and a lot of steps for the majority of us. And those are things that have gone through, and that I've coached some of my clients through. So those are the things I help men with these days.
Wow, yeah, it's an interesting concept and it sounds like a much needed area to focus on, that's for sure. And I'm interested, you mentioned in this modern day and age, it does need a lot more work. It does need a lot more effort. Why is that? And has it always been this way and is it just becoming more obvious? Or is this something that's just new to this modern world that we're living in because of social media, because the way dating is these days, because we have options all around the world? What is it that about this era that means we have to focus a little bit more on it, or has it always been this way?
Well, that's a great question. And so there's actually a variety of factors. I would say that there's three main factors as to why that's happened. There's a lot, but there's three primary factors. Primary factor number one is that, as we both know, let's say the accomplishment quotient, for example, of women has gone up significantly, which is to say there's more women starting their own business. There's more women that are going to college, graduating from college than there ever were before. There are more women earning more money than there ever were before. And so as a result, women kind of across the board have not all, but kind of as a general movement or as a general feeling, have increased their standard of the kind of men that they want. Now, that's a tricky subject in and of itself because some women in some corners of the world and in some platforms, as I'm sure you've seen, have, in my opinion, gone off the deep end. You know, they want a man who's like, for example, there's this girl that went viral for saying she wants a man who's 6'5", with a trust fund in finance. And it was like a meme. It was like a little rhythm, that she had. And as it turns out, I saw another video of this young lady that actually broke that down in terms of how many men are 6'5", green eyes, trust fund finance. And it was like something like 2% of men,
That is narrowing the field.
Yeah. So if that's what you're looking for, and if also you say something like that and you get a lot of women like saying, hey, I want that same thing. And you could have, 25% of your following or whatever that want that. But if there's only 2% of men, there's going to be a lot of disappointment, right? But anyway, my point is that's one kind of thing that's happened. Women have generally increased their standard in somewhat of a delulu and somewhat of a very hyperbolic way, but still increased nonetheless. And at the same time, there's been a bit of or maybe I shouldn't say a bit, but there's been a noticeable downturn of men, not only in terms of obviously, so we're talking about mental health, like this is Men's Mental Health Month, right? But there's been, you may or may not feel this way, but I've noticed like a feminization of men.
No, I have
So
noticed that.
it's kind of, yeah. So it's kind of started with, we have to express our feelings more. But I've seen men just kind of go off the deep end. I've seen it with my own two eyes. Like when a man does not get the woman that he wants or he feels he deserves, or I've seen men go off the deep end, like go wild, go nuts, go crazy, chase women down, get all emotional, crying in the street, screaming, yelling. There's the container of manhood, the container of masculinity that used to exist in terms of being stoic, having a hold of your emotions, having a control of how you operate, having control of all the people around you operate, your family, your woman. This container that men used to kind of exhibit has exploded, or maybe imploded is probably more accurate. Which is to say, as the men in the United States as a whole have become so overly emotional that some of us actually scare women. And for those of us that don't scare women, we're not attractive to women. There's a lot of men that have also lost, gotten divorced. Women initiate some up towards to 80% of divorces. And a lot of the times men are blindsided by that. Now, my overall assessment is the reason why that's happening is because men haven't been leaders in their relationship, leaders in their family. But the other thing is men of our generation aren't even aware that they're supposed to be leaders. You know, the men of our generation are kind of what I call Disneyfied. We've been brought up to believe that, you know, women are made of sugar and spice and everything nice, and we just need to make them happy in order to have a successful relationship. And I've myself experienced that that's not the case. If you're not leading in your relationship, people might feel a way about the word leading, and I get for some people that's triggering, but the masculine energy leads. It doesn't have to necessarily be a man, but the masculine energy leads, the feminine energy supports. That's the nature of the thing, right? So if the masculine energy is not leading, at some point the feminine energy is gonna feel unsafe. They're gonna feel as if they're not being directed. They're gonna feel as if they're not being guided, and they're going to either take on the masculine energy, which is then gonna decrease attraction, or they're going to find a masculine energy that they trust, that they're willing to support, whose leadership they are willing to accept, right? Either way, it's going to create this kind of situation between the two people. So the feminine, so women as a whole have increased their capacity to earn, their capacity to do on their own, and so their desires for the man, the type of man that they want, have also increased. Somewhat delusional, but in general, masculinity in men have made a decrease. There's a decrease in masculine men. There's a decrease of respect of masculinity. There's a decrease in understanding of the value of masculinity. So these things are happening at the exact same time. And at the same time, social media has exasperated this situation. Because social media we have incels and we have red pill. We have men that are very aggressive about how women are cheaters and liars, and they're all the same. So the men that are already feeling pretty down on themselves, they look at this information, they say, yeah, women do suck, which makes them go more into a downturn, because it puts them more into like a negative energy, almost like a feminine energy, like gossiping and getting mad and, but it's not, you can't do that as a man. I mean, you can have your own conversations if you go online and start talking poorly about women, you can't also expect that at some point have a good relationship with a woman. It doesn't work that way. But the same is true for women. You can't go online and talk poorly about men, but then expect at some point you're going to find a good man. Those things don't happen. So social media has exasperated this kind of separation. And those of us that can see through well enough to say, yeah, that I recognize that there's negative things happening in the women's community. There's negative things happen in the male community. But I want to try to create a path for myself where I can find the right person for me. So I'm going to operate in a certain kind of way. Those of us that are aware enough to see all this nonsense going on, we're just trying to navigate. And we're trying to find somebody else who's also trying to navigate. So there's a handful of people that are trying to find each other amongst this nonsense, right?
Man,
Very
there's
interesting.
so much to break down there. Yeah, it's super interesting. And I absolutely love this topic as well. Like outside of the health and fitness side of things and the personal development stuff, it's a deep interest of mine as well. I find it super, super fascinating as well. So it's everything that you broke down there. There's so much to unpack. And the first aspect I wanted to say is that you're right about the social media exasperation and the separation, because of what I've noticed is that in the real world, like when you go and talk to a woman or if you go and talk to a man, they've generally got a good idea of this dynamic of the masculine lead and the feminine supports, right? They don't feel so in their feelings about it, right? Whereas when you go on social media, you see the person who says, yeah, 6'3", green eyes, trust fund, Disney prince, and then the men who hate women. But the people who live in the real world and not in social media, you don't actually tend to find those quite as much. So you're absolutely right in terms of like the exaggeration of those two concepts. But the thing I want to break down first is the feminine improvement, so to speak. And obviously for anyone who's a genuine human being, we would notice that as something that's really, really good. Of course, the standards are being raised and the delusional aspect of it is probably not the best thing, but it makes sense that women want to demand more. Maybe they want a man who earns a little bit more than they do, who has a little bit more going on than, well, not even necessarily more, but has like at least the same and more, right? Like that's what they're looking for. Someone with a good social surroundings, good financial stability, good emotional health as well. And I don't see that as necessarily a bad thing. Obviously, when it comes to that next level of saying, okay, well, I want only this guy who's like, I know 100% above where I am, quote unquote, in terms of finances and everything along those lines. But from the perspective of a female who's making progress and who will continue to make progress, where do you see the solution in that? Because it's not going to be to tell females to slow down. They should, if anything, continue to speed up, because of humanity is only going to improve if we have better women. So what can we do about that conundrum first before we head on to the men? But at the same time, I have a feeling they might be quite intertwined. So you tell me.
Yeah. So first, to answer your question, I think, and again, another great question. To answer your question, I think that we need to reevaluate fundamentally the value of the masculine energy and the value of the feminine energy. Now, I was watching a show. I can't remember what the show was called. It's a panel of African American people, and they talk about relationships. And one of the guys on there, I think the show's like called After Talk or something of this nature. Anyway, it's a very popular podcast right now. And one of the guys on there, his name is Trip, right? And Trip, I believe he's an educator, and he tends to say very highly intelligent things on this particular show, on this panel. One of the things I heard him say, and I want to give him credit because I don't want to steal. One of the things I heard him say is that I thought was brilliant is he said, masculine is not just earning. It's not just providing and protecting. That is the masculine energy, but that's not just that. He said, masculine energy is structure. And when he said that, I thought, man, that's brilliant. And that is so true. So I'm saying that as a way to say that we've all been led to believe actually that the masculine energy simply provides and protects. And at the same time, we've noticed that hasn't worked because there are men who have provided and protected and their women are still leaving. Why is that? Because if you're providing and protecting, but you don't feel like if the woman doesn't feel like you're leading, in other words, if she doesn't feel seen, safe, and secure, if she doesn't feel if she doesn't feel protected, if she doesn't feel like there's a structure, if she doesn't feel like there's a container, you will still fail. The relationship will still fail, right? So a woman can out earn a man, but if she's still willing to follow his lead, because people are not going to want to admit this, but I've seen it, I've known it, I know it, and I know you know it. You can be a woman that earns very, very well and still be poor with your money. Or you can be a woman that earns very, very well and spend your money very, very well. But maybe you're poor with how you use your energy. Maybe you're poor with how you use your time. Maybe you're poor with the people that you let into your space, girlfriends, family that are taking advantage of you and you're allowing them. Maybe you're poor with who and how you share your body, right? These are these kinds of structures are things that tend to be more masculine that don't require earning, that don't require you to make $100,000 an hour, right? These are the kinds of things that men tend to see, masculine men tend to see, that can help protect a woman from her, essentially kind of from herself, right? And so we have to reevaluate the value of each other and kind of take money out of the equation, because money has been power for so long, right? And there's a lot of women that have felt like they've had power over them because of masculine earned money and kind of lowered that over them, right? So obviously, masculine men need to also take money out of the equation. Not only because it's not fair to kind of lower that as power over the feminine. That's not fair. That's not the right thing to do. But also because that's not actually what she wants and needs. It's not the money that the feminine, a true feminine woman wants and needs. It's the providing in terms of like providing your energy, providing your attention to her, attention to the kids, attention to the family, attention to the finances. It's providing your attention, providing a structure, and protecting the entire thing to make sure that you're all successful, not just you, not just her. That's the fundamental understanding I think we're missing.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And it's about being the complete man, so to speak, rather than just focusing, like hyper focusing on this one area, so to speak, and saying, okay, well, I need to earn more than all the women around me. Because if you're missing that structure piece, if you're missing that emotional intelligence piece, if you're not able to feel like you can lead them in any other way, then yeah, there's still going to be gaps. And you see this all the time, right? You know, you see very high profile breakdowns of incredibly rich dudes. And if that was the formula, then they wouldn't ever happen, right? We wouldn't ever see any divorce or breakups of these super rich dudes, because if money was the solution, then they would have it all worked out, and clearly it isn't. So it's great that you landed on that point. So where do we go as men from that perspective? Obviously, we want to kind of allow ourselves to embed ourselves in these traditional masculine values. However, there's this kind of conundrum of being a toxic masculine man, right? Like the traditional masculine traits become toxic, or then we need to be over feminized because of there's an aspect of, okay, well, we need to just like kind of walk around eggshells when it comes to women. We can't ask them out anymore because it might be seen as abusive or being, so misogynistic, right? There's so much of this balance to play. So where do we go as men from this perspective? Is it about focusing on those values and then that's the energy you're going to attract? Or do we need I personally think that there needs to be kind of a big overcorrection. It's funny enough, my fiance literally asked me this the other day. She was like, do you feel like men are becoming more female? It's like, you've hit the nail on the head here. And I was saying, I think it will be worse before it becomes better. And I think there's going to be more of this masculine woman energy around, and there's going to be more of this feminine male energy around. And I think until it reaches a bit of a breaking point where people are like, okay, this world isn't working this way, then a harsh overcorrection is going to take place, because I feel like this kind of separation right now is the overcorrection for men being, closed off from their emotions and women being not able to vote, staying in the kitchen, all this other stuff. But I feel like we're kind of heading in the complete other direction. So long story short, where can we go about this as men?
Yeah, great question. So I've learned a lot. So let me also say that people like to they like to throw out the words, the names, Andrew Tate, Fresh and Fit, and, Myron Gaines, and there's plenty of others, and they like to run those guys under the bus. And to some extent, I understand that, but I also have to say that not all of their content, but some of their content I do agree with, and I also have to say that those guys, whether people want to admit it or not, these guys have saved a lot of men. They've saved a lot of men from relationships, situations that either were damaging them or were going to destroy them by waking them up to some realities of women that they didn't understand or know prior to, myself included, right? So I get really kind of irritated when people take those guys' names and if you're not aware enough to be able to say, okay, what this guy is saying makes sense, but this same guy, he said this, and that's disrespectful. He said this, and that's completely out of left field. But there is just one or two things that he said that were actually really powerful. I need to really reflect on it. If you're not self-aware enough to listen to somebody and be able to be able to determine what's valuable and what's not, if you're just gonna throw everything that they say out with them, throw the baby out with the bathwater, as they say. If you don't have that ability to have that discernment, then you shouldn't be paying attention to social media anyway, because it's gonna lead you down the wrong path no matter what. So you have to have some critical thinking skills. You have to have some self-awareness. Okay. And there's some women, I'm sure, on the other side that you can see that about as well. Okay, so that said, though, as far as what the men have to do, at the end of the day, you can't expect to be successful with women and in a relationship if you're going to decide to be an incel for any amount of time, right? Now, I recognize that there are people that do that, and I'm not disrespecting them. MGTOW, going your own way. If that's what you want to do, that's what you want to do. But at some point, you're going to want a relationship. Some point, as a man, you're going to want a woman by your side. And if you're not willing to go out into the field and practice what it takes in order to get a woman, if you're not willing to face that rejection, if you're not willing to go through the relationship here, 6 months here, 8 months, 2 years, and get your head, and kind of get your head bashed in the same way you would if you were a basketball player and if you're on the court, the same way you would, you'd get beat up until you figured it out. The same way you would if you were an MMA fighter, you get beat up until you figure it out. The same way you would if you're a corporate, hedge fund investor, you'd get beat up until you figure it out. Everything else that men do, we are willing to get beat up until we figure it out, except when it comes to women in this day and age. And that's the problem. Because we have to go first. If we go first, if we tend to better ourselves in terms of how we show up in our masculine energy, again, it doesn't have to do with earning. That just has to do with having direction, purpose, and leadership, right? If we showed up better in terms of how we operate in our masculinity, then eventually, not all women, but there are some women that have to follow suit. Why? Because those are the men that they actually want. The men that have purpose, direction, and leadership. Those are the men that they actually want. Women want manly men, no matter what they say. Or, I don't need a man. I don't want a man. Okay, they can do all that. But I've seen that as well. I've seen very strong, powerful women, and when a masculine man comes to the room, that's who they're paying attention to. It doesn't have to do with height. It doesn't have to do with money. It doesn't have to do with skin color. It doesn't have to do with jewelry. It doesn't have to do with any of that. There's only two things, and I can't remember the guy's name, but he has a show called Psych Hacks, right? I can't remember his name, but he's brilliant. And he broke it down to this: backbone and balls. You have to have a backbone to back up what you say, and you have to have the balls to actually say it and do it. If you do that, if you can do those two basic things from his perspective, and I agree with him, you can be a masculine man. If you don't have backbone and balls, women don't want to mess with you. I mean, they maybe they'll entertain you a little bit, but they don't want to. It's too unattractive to them. It's too unsafe, right? It's too uncomfortable. And now that I'm on the other side of what I've experienced, it makes complete sense. Men tend to look at women and say, "Why aren't women more like men?" Is what basically if we're asking, right? They get frustrated, like, "Why do women say things that don't make sense? Why do they say one thing and they do another?" Because that's how the feminine operates. The feminine is like it's feminine is like a tidal wave, right? It's like an emotional tidal wave, right? That and their actions go with but their words. Do you want a man that's nice? Yes. Do you want a man that's going to take walks with you on the beach? Yes. Do you want a man that's going to hold your hand? Yes. Do you want a man that's going to say nice things to you? Yes, of course. Who wouldn't say that, right? And there's truth to that. But they also want a man that's going to, don't go this way, go that way. We're not going to do this. We're going to do that. It's not safe here. We got to go there. Hey, bedroom now. They want a man that's going to like take charge, right? No matter, and if they don't want that, then it's probably not the woman for you, right? And that's okay. But I'm saying that when men decide that we're going to lead and we're going to dive more into our purpose, more into our direction, and more into learning how to be leaders, learning how to making ourselves physically strong. Well, I call it this. I call it three things. Masculinity, in my opinion, is physically fit. You have to be physically fit. Because if you're not physically fit, if you're not physically strong, you don't seem like, if you can't control your own body, you can't control anything else. You have to be physically fit, purpose directed, and passion infected. You have to be excited about life. You have to, even if there's no woman around, you have to generate a life where you're excited about, where you're doing things that make you happy. Everything's a hell yes. Your people, the places you go, your hobbies, your work is a hell yes. If you can create a hell yes life, you're going to get a hell yes woman that's going to want to come into your life. So if you can be physically fit, purpose directed, and passion affected, you can do a lot of good in the world, and you're going to attract the woman that you want, and most likely be able to maintain that. If you can't do those things, it's going to be very difficult.
Yeah, I love that, man. And I think it's a beautiful framework for men to work off as well, because if none of that is directed towards attracting a woman. And I think that sometimes men get so caught up in, I need to attract the woman, I need to attract the woman. And all of this stuff comes from around, okay, well, how do I go about dating? How do I manage the game? You know, they go down the Neil Strauss route and try to attract all these women rather than focusing on themselves. Like you said, if you're physically fit, if you're purpose driven and you're passion affected, I believe you said, like there's nothing bad that can lead down, like that's nothing bad that can come down that path. If you go down that path, it's only going to lead to good things. And the reality is that you will attract the energy along the way. The only thing I can see someone getting interrupted by and getting distracted by are two things. The first is potentially their childhood trauma. You know, they have a really, really disruptive and dysfunctional view of what a male and female relationship looks like, or they listen too much to the media, etc., etc. And then obviously the second aspect is actually them getting distracted once they're in a relationship. So they stop focusing on those things. So how do we navigate both of those things? The first one being the childhood trauma, which is not dealt with, and that only kind of comes to the surface a little bit later or once they get into that relationship. And obviously the second aspect of not continuing with the things that took them there, you know, because I say this within health and fitness all the time, like the habits that got you in shape will keep you in shape. However, a lot of people seem to let go of those habits once they get to the place that they want to be. So I can imagine that a lot of people, they'll get the woman, they get the man, and then all of a sudden they don't tend to do the same thing or have the same traits that allowed them to get to that place in the first place. So how do we avoid this conundrum?
That's another fantastic question. You asked really good questions, man.
Thank you.
This is not your first rodeo.
It's not.
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. So the way I see it is everything that I mentioned, physically fit, purpose directed, and passion affected, is a kind of a continuous loop. And also each one has an underlining value beyond just the obvious. So when you get physically fit, for example, you create a situation where you have to create a situation where you're going to build your body on a consistent basis. You know, hit the gym, lift 3 times a week, you know, maybe one day it's back and buys, chest and tries, legs. But once you build that consistency, then you're also starting to build a consistency in terms of thinking about who it is that you want to be. And you're also starting to build a consistency about showing up as the man that you want to be. I want to be strong. Okay. Then you have to start thinking, well, what else goes along with strong? Being strong also means dedicated, consistent, resilient, right? So you build up a resistance in your muscles, but you also have to build up a resilience in your mind to be able to do that, which then also means you have to build up a resilience in your emotions, because there's going to be many days you don't want to go to the gym, right? So you're building up this kind of newer standard. If you're starting from, starting from the beginning, starting from the bottom, you're building up this newer standard of having resilience in your physical body, a sense of resilience, a sense of, and even wanting to hopefully get a sense of mastery, which then means I want to get a sense of resilience, a sense of understanding and mastery and how I operate mentally. Which then means, well, if I got to do that, that means I have to get a sense of resilience, a sense of mastery, and a sense of understanding how I operate emotionally. So the physically fit thing we work at the surface, but then it starts to dig deeper down because you can't do one without the other. The same thing, when you start to talk about purpose, you have to then start to talk about, okay, what it is that I want, right? And you can go to the Ikigai principle, right? Ikigai, Japanese term, which is meaning of life, right? Ikigai, something that you do, like a God-given talent, something that you love to do, something that you could get paid for, and something that's of service to others, right? When you have to start to tackle these kind of ideas of purpose, right? Something that you love to do, something that's like a God-given talent, something that you can make money from, and something that's of service to others. Once you start to tackle purpose, you have to ask yourself, what do I really want? Who am I really? And as you start to go through that process, you'll start to find, well, I like this, but I don't like that. For example, I have a talent of writing. Why don't I write? Okay, when's the last time I wrote? Well, I wrote when I was in high school. What was I writing about in high school? I was writing about love. I was writing about relationships. Okay, what was else going on when I was in high school? I watched a lot of domestic violence in my household. So it skewed my relationship with women. It skewed my relationship with love. Okay, so how else did that affect you? How's that affecting you now? So as you start to dive into purpose, you'll start to, as you get to ask yourself deeper, harder questions, you'll start to have to attack that trauma at some point. It's going to show up and you're going to have to address it, right? And if it doesn't show up in purpose, if somehow you are able to kind of make it through and get to a purpose, it'll definitely show up when you get to the passion part, because you'll have to start to ask yourself, why am I not happy here? I have a job. I make six figures. I go into the office. I'm a mid-level manager and I hate it. I make good money. I can take vacations and I hate what I do. Why? Right? What is happening here? Is this part of my purpose? Well, maybe I do my purpose on the side, but there's something here that really bugs me. What is it that bugs me? Is it my manager? Is it the work that I do? Is it my coworkers? This one guy said this one thing and it really triggered me. Why did that trigger me? Oh, it triggered me because if I really think about it, I remember a time when somebody said something else to me like that. Who was it? I think it was my father. He looked at me this way. He said something to me and made me feel low and made me feel small. And I've been trying to drive to the corporate ladder ever since. I know people like this. I know people, because I do personal training. I know people who are very, very successful. And what a lot of people don't know about very successful people is a lot of times is driven more from a dark energy than a positive. They're in an interview, they'll say, yeah, I wanted to serve the world. I want to make money for my family. And that's true. But a lot of times, especially if it's a man, it's something with their father. My father did this. My father said this. My father wasn't there, right? And I wanted to prove to him that I wanted to show him. I wanted to. And it's like, but it's like, I get that. But bro, you're like 45 years old. You're 55 years old. Like, I don't say this to him, but I'm thinking, and then I have to look at myself and I'm doing the same thing, driven by this dark energy. Like, my father wasn't there. My stepfather, he did this, and I wanted to show him. I wanted to prove, and I wanted to. And that only rides for so long. And at some point, you have to say, okay, that's not working for me anymore, right? So at some point, it's in this process, it's going to show up. And also, it's an ongoing process. So as you start to uncover layers, there's going to be more. And you're going to go back and forth, right? I need to peel another onion layer. Okay, I'm good again. I go back into the water. I have a little more successful. Oh, something else came up. I need to go back. Okay, take a look at this maybe. Oh, something else. Right? There's a little bit of a back and forth. Not all the time, not always, but there'll be some back and forth. But as you continue to get more comfortable with addressing those issues, it makes it easier for you to elevate as a man, as a person. Not only your money, but also your fitness, your finances, how much fun did you have, your relationship with women. All these things can start to elevate as you feel more comfortable and get more courage about digging through these things. Have you experienced that, by the way? I'm curious. Have you experienced that kind of thing?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel that a lot of what got me to where I am today was initially driven by the dark energy. I would have zero doubts about saying that. I think I recognized it within myself and I kind of harnessed it as a superpower. And there was nothing wrong with that initially until I realized that that is not sustainable. And like you said, like some guys get to 45, but they've been living in misery for the last 15 years. They might look good on paper, but when they actually look around in the terms of things that they actually want in their life, they realize that, you know, that dark energy will only get you so far for so long. And it's interesting because I met my fiance around 2 years and 3 months ago or something along those lines. And obviously I've had a fantastic relationship since then. We're actually getting married in about 4 days, which is pretty incredible.
Oh, congratulations. That's amazing.
Thank you so much. Yeah, exactly. But the thing that I always say to her is like, I never had any doubts that I would be successful. I'd never had any doubts that I would put myself in a good position, but I just don't know how happy I would have been doing it. And that's where she came in. She made the difference from that perspective, in the sense of like recognizing that I didn't always have to rely on that dark energy, and obviously gave me a different type of purpose, which was a lot more of a cleaner source of energy, because I wasn't working from going against what I didn't want to be. I was now working towards something that I did want to be. You know, it gave me a forward focus versus a running from behind me focus, if you know what I mean. Something's chasing me. And I think a little bit of that is good to tap in from time to time, because I don't think there's anyone who's successful at a high level who hasn't utilized that energy. But then, you know, you look at the Michael Jordan documentary, The Last Dance, and you still see him as kind of bitter, man. He's still living from that dark energy to a degree, you know? And it's like, totally. You know, he's sitting in this mansion drinking his whiskey, but he doesn't look happy at the end of the day. And I mean, yeah, obviously he's probably one of the greatest athletes of all time, but you know, that's sometimes the trade-offs we have to take to be hyper elite. And I don't disregard that whatsoever. But if you do want to be like a very complete, and you want to have different things in your life, you know, you want to have family, you want to have happiness, you want to have joy, you want to have a healthy relationship as well as success, I think at some point you have to transfer over to that clean energy, or you will end up in that kind of Michael Jordan position. So yeah, I can absolutely relate with that as well. And yourself, I should imagine too.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. Definitely driven by the dark energy. Definitely, like, I found myself being able to be incredibly productive when I was, you know, angry, pissed off at somebody, something, somewhere. And, yeah, man, it just gets the job done. It's just it just gets the job done. But also, to your point, when you stay there too long, most of us, it'll break you down, or it'll lead you to vices, because you'll feel like, you know, you're so aggressive on one end that you might feel like you have to balance it out by being overly aggressive on something that kind of takes the edge off. Drinking, gambling, you know, sex addiction, what else? Addiction, whatever else it could be. So yeah, you have to be careful with that, man. It's a double-edged sword. You have to be careful.
Yeah, exactly. And the challenge is it often took us to the biggest successes in our life. And that's why sometimes we have a hard job letting go of it. And I honestly don't think if I didn't get into this relationship, I don't know if I would have let go of it. And like I said, I dread to think where my mental well-being would be at this stage. And like I said, yeah, I might look good on paper, but I don't know where my head would be and where everything else in my life would be. Because if I do like really strip all the layers back and ask myself what I truly do want, like I do want a life where there's a lot of different attributes and aspects to it. It's not just about having a successful podcast or business, right? It's way, way more than that. You know, there are a lot more beautiful things to enjoy in life and to get from it versus just kind of accomplishments in one singular area. So no, I can totally relate from that perspective. And the question that I have as well is that you mentioned that a lot of men can go through rejection when it comes to work. They can do it when it comes to sport. They can do it when it comes to all different stages of life. Why does it hit us so hard when it comes to women? Is it just a deep evolutionary kind of trauma kicking in of like, okay, well, I need to procreate, I need to have a tribe, and therefore I need to create my family, and that's why it hits us so deep? Or is there just something different there where it just stings a little bit more? But I can see us having resilience in a lot of other areas, but I find men can be a little bit more fragile when it comes to this. And that's what leads to, you know, the men going their own way, etc. type mindset, right? It hits once and they can relate to another person and they find themselves a sense of community. But I don't think that many men need to, well, they can go their own way, but I think they can also go away with a female by their sides as well.
I agree 1,000%. Another good question. And my assessment is it's there's another social media sound. There's this amazing creator, and he says emotional damage, right? He's a Chinese guy. I can't think of his name. I can't think of anybody's name right now. Anyway, but it's emotional damage, right? We take it personal. Men take it personal. So for us, it's like I'm in the gym. That's like a physical resilience. If I'm trying to accomplish at work, I'm trying to get my career to the next level, you know, and there's ups and downs. That's a mental resilience. But if I'm trying to talk to a girl and she doesn't like me and she says my teeth are too long or my pants are too short, then that's an emotional resilience that a lot of us have never built up. One of the other things that men are challenged by, and women too, is that we have to be honest. We didn't get the game of masculinity, femininity from the previous generation. They didn't download it to us, right? So a lot of us went out into the world and we're thinking one thing, but it's actually another. And then we have all these kind of like outside sources trying to tell us how to treat women, how to treat men, right? But the generation before us, they didn't download us the game. So we have to. It's not necessarily to blame them, but it's to really say that we're all like men and women. We're all in this situation where we don't know. There's a lot that we went into relationships with, marriages with, a lot of information that we didn't know, a lot about each other that we didn't understand. That generations before us did that we did not get. We did not get that memo. Okay, so. With that said, if we're going to, hopefully change this, men have to also develop an emotional resilience, right? And I think emotional resilience is actually more important than emotional intelligence. You can't get emotional intelligence unless you have emotional resilience. What do I mean by that? When I came out of my marriage, I came out of my marriage. I did some dating. I got with a woman that she was not very good for me. She was actually super toxic. There's a lot of back and forth. Terrible. Got out of that. Then I started dating again and just taking my time, right? I was talking to one of my clients. I have brilliant clients, and he's a successful guy, married, 2 kids. And I'm thinking to myself, we've been training for years up until this point. I'm thinking to myself, like, I have more risk than this guy, right? I didn't say this to him. I'm thinking to myself, I have more risk. One day I'm telling him about my dating relationships, and he's like, okay, you need to do this and this and this, right? He starts giving me tips. And in my mind, I'm like, I'm the guy with the sauce, not you. You're just an average guy at best, right? But as I start taking his tips, I'm like, wow, this guy's brilliant. And I asked him, I said, where'd you learn all this? He's like, how to operate on dating profiles, how to operate with a woman, when to take her on a date, when to not take her on a date, why you don't take her on a date, when to call back, when not to call back, what to say. He had the whole game in his head. And he's like, I was like, you didn't write any of this down? No. Does your wife know this? No, she has no idea. I was like, you should coach people. I can't out myself, but I can give it to you. So he gave me the game, right? Almost from A to Z. And so one of the things I said, well, how'd you figure this out? He said, I made a lot of mistakes. So he said, you're going to make a lot of mistakes. Like, you're going to do this and this. He said, that's okay. So I date, I get it, talking to a girl on an app, and then I kind of started getting going, and then I lose it. I talk to her app, get a date goes well, but then and I do this over and over. I get frustrated. At some point, he's like, we're just getting you better so that when you meet the girl, you're ready. Like, when you meet her, you're ready. So all this other mistakes, it doesn't matter as much, but also it's kind of important. You need this. You need to get this feedback. All right, so we go through a situation. I show him my text. I show him my conversations. Don't say this, say that. Or you shouldn't have said this. Okay, now I see why she ghosted you. All this kind of stuff, right? And eventually, I started getting to some really good women, right? And he's like, okay, now we can start to talk about whether or not you want to keep her, right? And I was like, wow, it actually didn't take that long. But I remember in the process, I was like, oh, I was so frustrated at times. I was like, oh my God. And I was like, oh, she got away. I'm so hurt. And he's like, okay, I see you're hurt. It's not the end of the world, right? I had almost zero emotional resilience. I thought I did, but I realized I really didn't. That's the issue. Men don't have enough emotional resilience, and therefore they don't have the emotional intelligence to be able to say, I like her. I don't like her. She's rejecting me. This is why. This is how I showed up masculine. That's how I showed up on my masculine. This is how I showed up a little bit, and more of my feminine made her unsafe. Okay, this is how I make corrections in the next one. I lost that one. Sucks. Maybe next one I'll do better, right? We haven't built that up when we have to, because again, we didn't get downloaded the game. So now we have to learn it from the bottom. That's what it is.
That's a great piece. That guy definitely needs a book, a course, and all of the above. But now you've got his secrets as well, so maybe you can do the same thing for him on his behalf. But no, I love that, and it's something that came to my mind. I was like, if I ever have a son one day, the thing I want to teach him when it comes to dating and relationships is that you want to treat it in the same way as sports, and you want to keep it in the same way as kind of, your work as well. Like, if I get off the back of a sales call, if anyone does that and someone says, hey, no, now is not the right time, or I don't want to work with you right now. Like, you don't say, oh, well, I'm never going to have a sales call again. And you're like, well, sales calls suck. And, everyone who wants to be a client of a business is a terrible person. I'm just going to go my own way. You definitely don't do that. You go, well, okay, let me brush myself off. Let me learn from what happened here. And sometimes it's not even
Right.
about you, it's about the person, right? So you might have just met a woman who's just left a super toxic relationship, and your face
Yeah.
reminds her of
I've
your
had
ex, right?
something
Like
like
that
that.
might be what
Yeah,
it
I've
comes
had
down
something
to.
like that.
It,
Yeah, yeah.
there you go, man. So something like that could be the case. Or the same with sports as well, or even the gym. You don't go into the gym and be like, okay, today I'm going to pick up this 70-pound dumbbell. If you've not picked up the 20s, the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, you got to put in your reps first. So I think that that's a big one as well. It's like, take that rejection as not necessarily a good thing, but almost, and this might seem quite bad to say, but I do see it this way. It's like, I see my past relationships and everything like that as a warm up and kind of like practice to get to where I am today. And in a way, at the time, I didn't enjoy making those mistakes, but I'm glad I made them, because now I don't make them with the most important, this is, the most important game of my life, and I'm going to continue playing. This is my cup final, right? And I plan on winning this. Whereas all the other games, they were just warm-ups before, they were practice sessions. But I don't think people look at it like that. And it's not to say that dating is a game or relationships are a game, but you do want to take, the reality of the fact is that you're going to learn, you're going to make mistakes, you're going to need to reflect, you're going to need to get a lot more self-aware, but you can't let a couple of losses or failing, that set as a complete setback, and you can never go back to the gym or never play that sport again, right? So I think that that's huge, and I love that you broke that down. And man, I would have a probably 5-hour
I
conversation with
know,
you
right? I
if time
know.
allowed today. It was been an awesome one, but I want to leave the people with the place to find you if this has piqued their curiosity as well. So where is the best place for people to find you and keep up with the work that you're doing?
The places I'm most active is on Facebook. The whole Facebook thing / Jeremy D Murphy. Also, I'm active on TikTok, Jeremy D Murphy, and also my website www.jeremydmurphy.com. When you go to the main page, at the bottom, you can click to book a consultation with me. I believe I'll offer a free 60-minute consultation for any man or even a woman that wants to learn more about the masculine, feminine energy, right? So I don't coach around men and women necessarily. I coach around energy, masculine energy and feminine energy. And I found that when you show up in your masculine energy, there's certain things you have to do. But when it shows up and you make it like a natural thing, feminine energy will naturally want to find you. So it's not even that you don't have to do as much searching. The most recent woman that I'm dating now, we're having a good time. I was on the dating apps. I found her. I found her at the gym. She lives, down the street from me. It was like we just found each other. It was like easy. As you get more into your masculine, dating becomes easier and easier. But you're not doing it to date. You're doing it because it fills you up, right? You make it about you. It's like you create a universe for yourself. And then people that are in your orbit, they want to get closer to you because you create gravitas as a man. That's the goal.
I love that, man. Jeremy, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it, man.
Yeah, bro. Thank you, man. It was great. We should do it again.